It was supposed to be a quick scroll. Graham had just come home from the office, dropped his keys on the counter like he always did, and sat down at the kitchen table with a beer in hand. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Josephine had taken the boys to her sister's for the weekend. He figured he'd finally pull up those vacation photos from Lake George, the last decent trip they all took together before things turned cold. He opened the shared iCloud account, the same one they'd both used for years. Typed in Lake George. A few thumbnails popped up. Dock photos, jet skis, the kids laughing in the water. And then he saw it. A folder named for later. His thumb hovered over it. He didn't know why. Maybe instinct. Maybe the way the name felt out of place. Like a whisper in a room that should have been silent. He tapped it. What stared back at him stopped his breath cold. Photos. Dozens of them. Of Josephine and Ryan, in hotel rooms, in their old bed, in his truck, laughing, naked, kissing, videos, screen recordings of text conversations that dated back years. Ones that made it clear this wasn't a one-time mistake. This had been going on for nearly a decade, since before Weston's birthday party, since Andrew's middle school graduation, since before they refinanced the house. His jaw tightened, teeth grinding hard enough he thought one might crack. He didn't yell, didn't scream, didn't even curse. Instead, he closed the phone, walked to the sink, poured out the rest of the beer, and stared out the window over the empty backyard, where Ryan once helped him build the fire pit. The rage didn't explode. It sat like molten metal beneath the skin, burning slow and steady. He stood there a long time, motionless. When he finally moved, it was mechanical. He grabbed a duffel bag from the hall closet, packed it with clothes, nothing special, just the basics. Work boots, 3 shirts, 1 pair of jeans, 1 pair of slacks, a belt, his backup shaving kit. He left the phone on the counter, unlocked. He wanted her to know exactly what he'd seen. No explanations needed, no note, no dramatic goodbye. He got in his truck, started the engine, and drove away. The drive was quiet, no radio, just the hum of tires on asphalt. He wasn't thinking about divorce lawyers, or custody, or vengeance. He wasn't thinking at all. His mind was a clean white sheet, sterile and cold. By the time he pulled into the driveway of an old rental cabin he'd used years ago for hunting season, night had fallen. He parked, killed the engine, and stared out into the woods. He didn't cry, didn't call anyone. Just walked inside, dropped his bag on the floor, and sat down on the edge of the old couch. Everything had changed. But he felt nothing, not yet, just a vast, empty calm. Josephine didn't call that night. Not the next morning either, but by the second afternoon she'd figured it out. Graham heard the knock on the door just after 4 p.m. He didn't rush to answer it. He finished tying off the last fence panel behind the cabin, something to keep deer from chewing up the old herb bed. When he finally came around the side, Josephine was standing there with her arms crossed, face tight like she was bracing for a fight she thought she might still win. "I assume you saw it," she said. Graham didn't answer, just brushed past her, opened the door and stepped inside. She followed him in. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she offered. "It just happened." He set his gloves down on the counter, turned to her finally. His voice was flat, devoid of volume or rage. For 10 years she flinched, just once, then shrugged. "Look, I don't want to fight. I came to talk like an adult. You don't get to decide what adults do anymore," Graham said. "You lost that right when you let him into our bed, when you laughed behind my back, when you chose him again and again, while I raised our boys and worked double shifts to keep us steady." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't be dramatic." That was the only time his voice rose, barely. "You cheated on me with my best friend for a decade and I'm being dramatic?" Silence. Josephine looked around the cabin, clearly disgusted by its dust, its simplicity, its lack of candles and curated furniture. "So what now?" "I'm filing." "Tomorrow," he said. "No fault. No custody fight. No house battle. You can keep it. Just don't speak my name to the boys like you speak it to him." She blinked. "You're just going to give me the house? It's not a gift. It's a severance. I'm not going to fight for a building you already brought him into. I'd burn it down before I called it home again." She opened her mouth to say something else, but stopped herself. There was no anger in him for her to push back against, just cold, resolute distance. She was expecting fury, fire, a man on the edge. Instead, she found a man who had already let go. Graham walked to the table, opened a drawer, and pulled out a clean envelope. Inside were the first draft divorce papers signed. She stared at them, stunned by the speed. "You already had these?" "I've been awake for 36 hours, he said simply, "and I don't waste time." She swallowed hard. "You're really done, aren't you?" Graham looked her in the eye. "You ended this, Joe. I'm just clearing the wreckage." When she left, she didn't slam the door, just stepped out like a stranger in a stranger's home. Graham watched her drive away through the window, the taillights fading around the bend of the gravel road. He didn't pour a drink, didn't call a friend, just went back outside, picked up his hammer, and kept working on the fence. Each nail he drove in echoed like punctuation marks in a sentence. He never had to speak. "I know, I saw, I'm done." The next day, he filed for divorce. She didn't contest. 3 weeks later, he handed over the house keys and never returned. By then, he was already living full-time in the cabin. His law firm let him work remotely. The boys stayed quiet. Josephine never reached out again, except through the lawyer. And Graham, he adjusted, like a man learning to breathe again after years in stale air. He still felt the betrayal burning under the surface, but he never let it boil over. He wasn't a man made for tantrums. He was a man made for silence, for walls, for endings. It was a Tuesday when the thought first crept in quiet, like a splinter under the skin. Graham was driving back from town, a sack of groceries on the passenger seat. When it hit him, what if the boys weren't mine? Not because they didn't look like him. Andrew had his square jaw, Weston had his eyes, but betrayal rewires everything. It makes certainty feel like arrogance. It makes memory feel like fiction. After 10 years of lies, even the ground beneath his feet felt suspect. So he made a call, a discreet one. A week later, 2 DNA kits arrived in plain packaging. He didn't tell the boys, just asked them to spit into a vial for a genetics thing. They didn't question it. Andrew was too busy with college applications. Weston barely looked up from his phone. Graham mailed the kits off without ceremony. No note, no prayer, just a cold, clinical need to confirm what should have never been in doubt. 10 days later, the results came back. Both boys 100% his. He stared at the screen for a long time. He should have felt relief, joy even. Instead, he felt nothing. Not because he didn't love his sons, but because the betrayal had burned away the part of him that could feel anything cleanly. Even the truth now felt like a faded photograph, something real but distant, muted. That night, he sat on the back porch of the cabin with a cup of black coffee and watched the moon rise through the trees. Tucker, the old lab mix who never left, his side sat next to him, head resting on Graham's boot. He thought about the birthdays he never missed, the games he coached, the nights he stayed up late fixing bikes or teaching algebra. All of it had been real, his. And yet, none of it shielded him from what Josephine did. That was the hardest part. Not cheating, not even the length of the affair. It was that while he was pouring everything into their life, she was building a second one in the shadows with his best friend, no less. The betrayal didn't just hit him, it rewrote everything. And now, even though the test said he was the father, Graham couldn't feel it the same way anymore. The warmth was gone, The pride had a crack running through it. He went back to work the next day like nothing had changed, reviewed 2 contracts, fired off emails, and met with a new client over Zoom. His tone never wavered, his face gave nothing away. He saw the boys every other weekend, per the arrangement. Josephine tried to act like things were civil. Sometimes she made comments like, "They miss having us both around." Graham never replied, just nodded, took the boys and drove off. During one of the visits, Andrew mentioned Ryan in passing, something about him helping fix a flat tire. Graham didn't flinch, didn't ask questions, just kept driving. Inside, the fire stirred, but he didn't feed it. He wouldn't give Josephine or Ryan the satisfaction of knowing they still had power over him. That was over now. He wasn't their victim. He was the man who saw clearly and moved forward anyway, with or without feeling. There were no fireworks when Graham walked into his nephew's birthday party alone. No hushed gasps, no angry stares, just polite hellos, half-hearted smiles, and a folding chair near the back of the yard where no one sat. Josephine was already there, so was Ryan. They stood together near the cake table like nothing had happened. Like a decade of betrayal could be rinsed away with matching pastel shirts and Parent of the Year energy. Ryan laughed too loudly at things no one said. Josephine kept putting her hand on his arm, eyes darting toward Graham every few minutes, as if waiting for a reaction that never came. Graham gave them nothing. He sat under the old oak tree, sipping a root beer, answering his niece's questions about math homework, smiling just enough to not draw concern. His boys came over one at a time. Andrew was stiff. Weston was quiet. Neither mentioned the obvious that had become the unspoken rule. Pretend everything is fine. Pretend Dad's just adjusting. Pretend the new arrangement is normal. But it wasn't. Nothing about it was normal. What kind of world lets a man build a life for 20 years, only to be erased and replaced by the one person who stood beside him through it all? He watched Ryan hand Weston a plate of cake like he'd earned that right. Watching Josephine smile at a joke Ryan made. One Graham knew was recycled. One he'd heard back when the 3 of them used to drink beers in the garage after the kids went to bed. Now the beer was Ryan's. The house was Ryan's. The life Graham built, repurposed like old lumber used for someone else's deck. Later that evening, his sister cornered him by the fence line. "You know, it wouldn't kill you to be civil." He raised an eyebrow. "I haven't said a word. That's just it. This cold shoulder thing, it's not helping anyone." Graham took a long breath. "I'm not here to help anyone. I'm here to see my nephew turn 10. "He's sick, Graham," she said quietly. "You know that." He turned sharp now. Don't start using guilt to get me to play nice. He's still your friend." "No," Graham interrupted. "He was my friend. He was also my kid's godfather. And he was the man who spent 10 years betraying me while smiling across my dinner table. That's not a friend, that's a knife with a handshake." His sister swallowed, saying nothing. Graham looked back toward the yard. Ryan was tossing a football with Weston. Josephine stood to the side, hands on her hips like she was proud of the picture. They were painting. "Everyone wants this to be some kind of hallmark healing moment," he said. "But that's not real life. Real life doesn't patch holes that deep with cake and lawn chairs. So you're just going to be alone forever?" He nodded, slow and calm. "If it means keeping my dignity intact, yes." She didn't understand. None of them did. To them, forgiveness was the highest virtue. But to Graham, boundaries were. He wasn't going to scream or throw punches. He was going to live his life without bending to the story everyone else wanted to write for him. He finished the root beer, tossed it in the bin, and quietly slipped out the side gate without saying goodbye. Not because he was angry, but because he wasn't going to sit through another moment where the world clapped for the people who tore his life apart. It started with a voicemail. "Hey man, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but look, I need to talk. Just once. I owe you that much. No excuses, no spin, just the truth. Please." Graham didn't call back. Then came the email. Then another. Then a text message 3 weeks later that simply read, "Graham, please." He ignored them all. Forgiveness wasn't on the menu, not for a man who shook his hand every weekend while sleeping with his wife. Not for a man who stood beside him at Weston's Little League finals, cheering like family, while dragging his marriage into the dirt behind his back. But Ryan didn't stop. He sent one more message. This time it was longer, a confession disguised as repentance. "I loved her. I didn't plan for it. I didn't mean to hurt you, but I know I did. I was weak. I was selfish. I miss my friend more than you know. Please, don't let this be how it ends." Graham read it once at the cabin table, lit by the soft yellow glow of a single bulb. Then he quietly blocked Ryan on every platform. There was no anger left to send, only ice, only distance. Josephine called the next day. He didn't pick up. Then she left a message. "Graham, I know you've heard from Ryan. I told him not to reach out, but he's hurting. He's not the same. He's trying. The boys see it. I just thought you should know." That last part made him laugh. The boys see it. Of course they did. That was the whole plan. Make it palatable. Make Ryan look like a man who made a mistake instead of a man who calculated his betrayal every time he showed up for a family dinner with store-bought wine and empty eyes. Later that week, Graham stood in the grocery store meat aisle, debating between ribeyes and ground chuck. When he saw Ryan, near the pharmacy counter, he didn't approach, didn't move, just watched. Ryan looked thinner, slower. His gait lacked that confident swagger he once carried like armor. For a flicker of a second, Ryan turned his head and their eyes met. Graham didn't blink. Ryan nodded weakly. Graham turned and walked away. That night, Josephine showed up at the cabin. No warning, no text. Just her headlights bleeding through the woods as Graham stood on the porch, arms crossed, waiting. She stepped out slowly, holding something in her hands. A scrapbook. "I thought you should have this," she said. "Photos of the boys. You're not in many of them, but I thought maybe you'd still want to see." He didn't take it. "Why now?" Her voice cracked a little. "Because you mattered, even when I was too blind to see it. Because Ryan, he's trying to be better. And because I still believe you have more to say than just silence." "I said everything I needed to the moment I walked out," Graham replied. "You just didn't listen." She stepped forward one last time. "You think you're the only one who lost something?" Graham didn't hesitate. "No. But I'm the only one who didn't choose to." The scrapbook stayed on the porch. She didn't try to hug him. She left without another word. 2 days later, a letter arrived in his mailbox. No return address. Just Ryan's handwriting. "You were the only man I ever respected more than I envied. That's the truth. I destroyed the one friendship I actually believed in. If I die tomorrow, I'll die knowing I ruined the best thing I had for something that wasn't even worth it in the end. But if you ever decide to speak again, I'll still be listening." Graham read it. Then he burned it in the fireplace. He didn't do it out of hate. He did it because some words didn't deserve to linger. The invitation came in the mail. White cardstock, gold trim. An anniversary party for Josephine's parents. Graham almost threw it out. But something about the handwritten note from his mother on the back kept his hand still. "Please come. For the boys. Don't let bitterness ruin the family." Bitterness. That's what they called it now. Not betrayal, not humiliation, not 10 years of being stabbed in the back while smiling through barbecues and Christmas dinners. Bitterness. He showed up. Alone, of course. Dressed in his usual dark button-down and jeans. No fanfare, no speech. Just a nod to the people who hadn't yet decided whether they pitied him or wished he'd just get over it. Josephine and Ryan arrived 15 minutes later. All smiles, holding hands like high school sweethearts. He in a tan jacket 2 sizes too tight. She in a dress Graham had seen before, back when it meant something. They worked the room like nothing had happened. Ryan hugged Graham's mother. Josephine clinked glasses with his sister. Cousins chatted with Ryan like he hadn't personally torched the family tree. It was sickening watching them blend in, as if time had given them a free pass. After 20 minutes of small talk and avoidance, his mother pulled him aside. "You can't keep holding on to this, Graham. Life's too short." He looked at her. "Holding on? I let go the moment I walked out. You know what I mean. Ryan's sick. He's trying." "So was I," he said coldly. "For 20 years. She flinched. "He's family now, whether you like it or not." He laughed. "Once." Sharp bitter. "No, he's your family. Not mine." "You're being stubborn," she whispered. "This isn't who you are." Graham's voice dropped low. Flat. Deliberate. "You don't get to tell me who I am after you poured forgiveness down my throat like medicine I never asked for." His sister joined in later after a few drinks. Pulled him into the hallway and hissed. "You're ruining things. This night isn't about you." "I didn't make it about me," Graham said. "But if your definition of peace means I have to smile while the man who betrayed me plays hero to my kids, then yeah, go ahead and call me the problem." She sighed. "They didn't kill anyone, Graham. They just fell in love." He stepped in close, voice calm but final. "Love doesn't hide in closets and hotel rooms. For 10 years. Love doesn't crawl into another man's life and call it home. That's not love. That's cowardice." She looked away. He didn't. Later, Ryan gave a toast. It was full of laughter and second chances and lessons learned. Josephine smiled, eyes glassy, clutching his hand like a prop. The crowd clapped. Graham didn't. He stood, walked out through the back without saying goodbye, and drove home in silence. No rage, just clarity. They'd picked a side and it wasn't his. And that was fine, because he no longer needed their version of family. He had his own, one he was building alone, with honesty, silence, and a sharp memory. The text came from Andrew. Just 2 words. "It's cancer." Graham stared at the screen for a long time before locking the phone and setting it face down on the kitchen table. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, but inside the cabin, everything was still heavy, expectant. He didn't respond. 2 days later, Josephine called. He answered this time more out of curiosity than concern. "Graham," she said, her voice brittle. "It's stage 4. They found it too late." He said nothing. She continued. "He's not doing well. He's asking for you." He leaned back in the chair, eyes fixed on a spider crawling across the windowsill. "Of course he is. You don't have to say anything. Just maybe see him. Just once. For the boys, if nothing else." "That's the thing, Joe," he said quietly. "Everything has always been for the boys. Never for me. Never for the man who got gutted and was expected to hand out grace like Halloween candy." "You're still angry," she whispered. "No," he said. "I'm just not available anymore." She didn't call again, but the boys did. Andrew first. "He's got maybe a few months? He's changed, Dad. He's not the same guy." Graham let the silence speak for him. "Don't you think holding on to all this is hurting you too?" Graham's voice was calm. "What's hurting me is everyone pretending like this." Was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. It was a campaign. A 10-year campaign to make me the fool. Andrew sighed. "I just thought maybe you'd want closure." "I had closure the day I walked away. You just didn't like what it looked like." The line went quiet. Then Andrew hung up. Then Weston called. Weston, the quieter one. Always the bridge. Always the one who tried to smooth the edges. He didn't start with small talk. "Mom said you're being cold." Graham smirked. "She would." "I don't get it, Dad. He's dying. He's not trying to win anymore. He just wants to talk, and I just want to be left alone. He's sorry. Not sorry enough to stop before he got caught. He's still my godfather. Graham's tone shifted. Still quiet, but with a warning underneath. He gave up the right to call himself that when he took what wasn't his. Weston exhaled hard. You're gonna regret this. No, son, Graham said. You will. That landed like a punch. But Graham didn't backpedal. You think you're standing on higher ground because you want to play mediator, but you're just another person telling the betrayed man to be smaller so the betrayers can sleep easier. Weston was silent. I taught you better than that, Graham finished. I taught you to stand for truth, even when it makes you an outcast. The call ended. No goodbye. That night, Graham took Tucker for a walk deep into the woods. The sky was bruised. With clouds, the air cold enough to sting his fingers. He liked it that way. Pain was honest. It didn't lie. It didn't ask him to pretend. He stood by the stream, water trickling slowly over the rocks, and thought about Ryan's funeral. The way it would look. The speeches. The slideshow. The tears. And how someone would eventually say, he made peace with everyone before the end. Graham wouldn't be part of that narrative. He wouldn't be the final ribbon on their redemption arc. Ryan would die knowing Graham never came. And Josephine? She'd live knowing some lines can't be crossed and then uncrossed with tears and good intentions. As for the boys, maybe they'd understand someday, maybe not. But Graham wasn't raising sons to be comfortable. He was raising men who needed to know what real consequences looked like. Ryan died on a Wednesday. No ceremony. No final call. No dramatic deathbed letter begging for forgiveness. Just a short message from Josephine to Graham's phone. He's gone. Graham didn't reply. 2 weeks passed. Then 4. Then spring came in full. Green bleeding back into the trees outside the cabin. Wildflowers creeping across the edge of the field. Graham planted new tomatoes. Fixed the roof. Took Tucker to the lake 3 times a week. He didn't speak to Josephine again. Didn't speak to Andrew either, not since that last phone call. But Weston still sent the occasional text. Short ones, updates about school, or asking for advice about buying a used car. Graham answered everyone. Never more than he needed to, but always answered. Then one afternoon an email arrived. It was from Andrew. Subject: Can we talk? Dad, I know things between us haven't been right. I know I said things that hurt you. I've been thinking about everything. About you. About what you went through. I didn't understand before, but I'm trying to now. I want to come up, just to talk. No pressure, just your son, wanting to see his father. Please. Graham stared at it for a long time. Read it twice. Then again. There were no lies in it. No pressure. Just words. Honest, maybe. Or maybe the start of another attempt to loop him back into a family that had long since chosen the comfort of pretending over the cost of truth. He opened a new message. Typed, no. Then, after a pause, he added one more line. The door closed. A long time ago, and I'm finally okay with that. He sent it. Then stood up from his desk, grabbed his boots, and stepped outside. The sun was setting slow behind the hills, streaking orange across the sky like fire on water. Tucker was all ready, waiting by the truck, tail wagging. Graham opened the passenger door, let the dog jump in, and climbed behind the wheel. There was no rage anymore. No grief either. Just the clean, quiet weight of a man who had chosen peace. Not the kind sold in movies with hugs and apologies, but the kind that comes from no longer giving your pain away to people who fed it. He drove toward town, windows down, the wind washing through the cabin of the old Ford. The road ahead was empty. And that, finally, was exactly how he wanted it.